We looked at the DZO Vespid primes back in December of 2020, and today we are checking out their new 16mm T2.8 for the set. This new lens now brings the Vespid series to 8 focal lengths in the set, with the widest before being 25mm. The 16mm is very well put together like the rest of the Vespid series, and it also has a very similar set of technical specs to the rest of the Vespid Prime series, which we'll go over quickly now. The first thing I noticed when I grabbed the lens out of the box was just how compact and light it is. It's absolutely tiny considering its image circle, focal length, and T2.8 aperture, although this may not be quite as fast as some of the other wides from Laowa, but it's more than fast enough for most scenarios you would use an ultra wide in. Though one thing that isn't small is its front element. This thing is large, so like any other wide angle with a large front element, make sure to be careful with it if you do grab this lens. It weighs just under 1 kilogram, which does make it the heaviest in the Vespid series, but it's normal for the wider and more telefocal lengths in lens sets to be heavier than the middle focal lengths. The provided front cap for it is actually quite weird. It has these cutouts, which mean that if you don't put it on in the correct orientation, the lens will have little holes exposing the front element. I don't understand why they didn't make the lens cap the same height all the way around so you could mount it in any orientation. This is a bit of a weird choice and hopefully something that DZO can fix. Mechanically, the lens feels incredibly solid, with smooth and consistent iris and focus rotations. It's built from anodized aluminium, so it feels just as sturdy as the rest of the Vespid set. The lens features standard 0.8 pitch gears on both iris and focus barrels, and a 270-degree focus throw. These gears are also positioned in the same place across the lens set, so you don't have to move your gears when switching lenses. The 16mm has the same 80mm front diameter as the rest of the set, but you cannot use front mounted screw-on filters due to the large front element and hood built into the lens. Though you will be able to use optional magnetic filters using the rear mounted system. The 16mm will be available in both PL and EF. The lens features a dual scale with both feet and meters. Meters are on the left of the lens and feet is on the right. Out of the box, our copy of the 16mm actually had pretty accurate markings, which is great to see. It has a close focus of 10 inches or roughly 0.8 feet, which is pretty good, and you can get some interesting imagery that close and wide. The full Vespid set has a rated image circle of 46.5mm, which is large enough to cover pretty much every full frame cinema sensor, even the V-Raptor's 46.306 diagonal. If we take a look at the 60mm coverage, we can see that there is some light loss towards the corners of frame while using the lens on the V-Raptor in its 8K 17:9 mode and the Mini LF in its open gate mode. This is clearly visible across the different T-stops and focus distances that we shot. As expected, performance is improved as you stop down, though you will still experience some drop off in the corners, and this isn't surprising on such a wide lens. If you want to see how the lens will behave on your camera, head over to our lens tool via the link in the description below, where you can see real-world light representations of the performance you can expect. We went out on a couple of shoots with our Raptor over the past month or so, and we managed to take the 16mm with us and shoot a few more creative examples. This was during a shoot with some local London fire spinners, as well as a trip to Bristol for an event. Let's take a look at them. Right, let's take a look at some controlled tests. All of these have been shot with our red V-Raptor, apart from the distortion stills, which were captured on our A7 III. Let's start off looking at the bokeh that the 16mm can produce. Wide open, we can see that our outer focus highlights here are overcorrected with very defined edges. It also has some colour around the highlight too, as well as a good amount of texture to it. At T4 we can see that our highlights aren't quite as defined and the aberration around the highlight has been reduced slightly. The 16mm Vespid features a 16 bladed iris, which means the centre of frame shape is great, even when stopped down to T5.6. However, wide open and at T4, we can see our highlights distorting in shape as we reach the corners of frame. At T5.6, there is less distortion towards the corners of frame, but it's not perfect. The The flare that the 16mm has is pretty damn crazy. In our controlled tests, we can see wide open that the lens has a very large and obvious circular flare around the edges of frame. We can also see this in some of our creative footage. This is an interesting look, but maybe a bit much for some people. Flare is subjective, but I think something this obvious and glaring may put some people off. As you stop down, it becomes less prominent, but it's definitely still there. Let us know what you think of this down in the comments below. When it comes to distortion, the lens performs pretty well. It suffers from a slight bit of barrel distortion, but given its focal length, size and weight, I think it performs really well. The DZO 16mm suffers from some quite noticeable breathing when pulling focus throughout its focus range, which you can see in our example here. When it comes to resolving power, the 16mm Vespid renders well in the centre of frame. As you stop down, you can see some resolving improvements, but there is clear aberration present throughout the t-stop range. In the corners, we can see a more dramatic improvement of contrast as you stop down. Aberration is clear throughout the t-stop range, in the corners also though, with it being reduced slightly as you stop down, but it's still very present stop down to t5.6. We first noticed this performance when we put it on our projector for the first time, where we could clearly see aberration all the way down to t8. However, this is similar to other Vespid primes, so it does mean that it will match with the rest of them, which is what you want with a set of cinema lenses. For owners of the Vespid set of primes, this is a great addition to the series that will match their existing focal lengths and slot in nicely just below the 25mm. However, if you're just looking to pick up a Cine ultra wide, there are plenty of other options on the market. At its price point, you only really have the IRIX primes and Laowa primes, and if you are wanting something a bit more neutral, the Laowa options are fantastic for their price. If you have a bit more to spend, there are also some great options from Sigma and Zeiss, but these are much more expensive, and the Sigma, while optically incredible, is a big lump. Let us know what you think of the DZOFILM 16mm Vespid Prime in the comments below, and if you like the video, please give it a like and maybe even consider subscribing so you don't miss out on our awesome upcoming content, and thank you so much for watching.